Fallout has tons of ways to outfit your character as you level up, but what if you wanted to play the game without perks and on the hardest difficulty? Today I'll be finding out if you can beat Fallout 4 without perks. Before we begin, the hardest difficulty at launch was very hard, with survival being added in later, and because of the massive changes it adds to the game, I'm going to treat it as its own game mode. So for the purpose of this challenge, I was asked to play on the hardest difficulty, which in this case will be very hard. I owe you a survival run and I will do one later, but due to parental duties, it won't be this week. With that out of the way, let's get into the run. I started out by making my character, then started doing normal house stuff while I waited for the Vault Tech rep so I could set my stats.
Okay, cool. Well, we're just gonna go, because we can't take perks, honestly, we're just gonna go max endurance and max agility. We have the ability to sneak, which is nice. That's kind of it. Like action points to maybe aim and cripple something later in the future, and endurance is just gonna make us have the most amount of health we have. Because we can't take anything like toughness or life giver, so we're just kind of on our own. And we'll take, I don't know, I guess we'll take like 3 charisma to talk, 3 extra points in charisma to talk our way out of something. But, yeah, that's it. Just all restrictions, and we'll see how we go.
After he left, I continued doing normal human stuff, and then the end of the world happened. Now, fun fact here, did you know you can actually die during this section? Because I didn't. After being resurrected, I made it to the vault alive this time, and then got into and out of a human popsicle maker. I did try and keep my experience points from increasing with console commands, but the only way you can turn those off is with a mod, so I'll be leveling up during the run, but the restrictions for no perk is still in place. Now the official run could start, and honestly the vault section went pretty by the numbers here. The rad roaches did more damage than normal, but nothing a baton or pistol couldn't sort out. I made it out of the vault and into the open world, and now came the prep. All my perks and abilities may have been restricted this time, but I was determined to pull out all the stops. And to do that, I needed to make it to Good Neighbor right from the get-go. I grabbed dog meat along the way since companions were allowed, and made the long, uneventful trek across the Commonwealth. Once at Good Neighbor, I stole a Fat Man and a mini nuke, and these would prove pivotal to the run. However, pulling off the technique that I was going to do would prove way harder than I thought. Essentially, what I was trying to do was add a mirv launcher onto my 10mm pistol. And I know what you're thinking. What did he just say? But trust me, you heard right. Since I couldn't craft any of the higher end weapon attachments, I would just make the game make it for me. Basically, what needed to happen was I had to use a series of inputs to make the game think the Fat Man had the mirv launcher attachment temporarily because I couldn't craft it without perks. Then I had to create the standard launcher while moving over the mirv launcher. This would use the materials to make the standard launcher, but it would make the mirv one instead. And then, as if that wasn't enough, I then had to scrap the Fat Man and move the mirv launcher onto my pistol. If performed correctly, I would have the craziest pistol you've ever seen. And now it was time to test it out.
Hold on, okay. So let's test this, right? Trash can. Sure. You took away my perks, so I'm using everything at my disposal.
It does, and it only consumes 1 bullet! Now that I had the hand of God, it was time to play the game, and first up was saving Nick. Only problem is, the Triggerman hideout is inside, and the mirv launcher took a time to figure out. To make a real long story short, I died a ton here. Sometimes the explosions would hit their targets, and sometimes I would just blow myself up. Towards the middle of this section, I just had to start running past people because there was no way I was going to kill them in such close quarter combat. I made it to Nick and had the same problem leaving. However, I could let Nick and Dogmeat fight the enemies in tighter spaces to make the travel out a little easier. But eventually we made it to Skinny Malone, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to talk my way out of this one. So I ran around the dialogue trigger and just let the mirvs do the talking for me. Once Nick and I made it back to his office, it was time to track down Kellogg, so I did the usual detective gig, and without too much hassle we were at Fort Hagen. but the fort proved a little too much for the mirvs to handle. Much like with any room with a roof, the mirvs were exploding way too close to me, and I ended up dying a ton here as well. So much so that I had to use an institute rifle to take out enemies while Nick cleared some others. That's not to say that I couldn't use the mirvs in some situations, but for close combat sections I had to use the rifle and stealth through. And Kellogg proved rather difficult because of this. I got a shot off as soon as the fight started, but couldn't quite land a second one, and to win I had to lure him and some synths down a hallway and shoot, hoping I didn't blow myself up in the process. But I did manage to take him down and the run could continue. I grabbed his brain and checked his files and then went to dive through his brain to progress the story. But before heading out to the glowing sea for Virgil, I made a pit stop back at Concord and laid waste to the inhabitants there to free the Minutemen. Who needs a Gatling gun when you have a mirv pistol? But once the homies were freed, I made the trek across the sea, and not too much to report as I just made a beeline for Virgil. But I got the info I needed, and with his help I could track down a courser and try to get the data to build a teleporter. However, this was far easier said than done. Green Tech Genetics posed the same threat as Vault 114 and Vort Hagen did, so I had to use other weapons in junction with the mirv launcher. Even while wearing power armor, I died here way more than I'd like to admit. It even got to the point towards the end that I was using melee weapons and running past gunners. But I was rewarded with my attrition because the courser's room at the end of this quest had a higher ceiling than the other rooms, meaning instead of getting a mini nuke to the face, he got 4. After securing the chip, I made my way to the railroad to decipher it, and then went back to the Minutemen to get my promotion. And thankfully, it was only at the cost of 2 settlers. Now that I was general, it was time to go join the Institute. Most of their missions are outside, so it was a no-brainer. I made it inside and joined Father's cause and got right to terrorizing the Commonwealth. I was tasked with hunting down a rogue synth pirate and decided to just go straight to the target himself, only to find out that he had guys with fat men ready to rock my shit. It got so bad I even quick-saved while getting blown up. Not my finest hour. So after resetting and laying waste to the raiders' positions, I made it to the synth and got to blasting. After reporting back to Father for a job well done, I was then tasked with doing more synth retention at Bunker Hill. But here is where problems arose. The mirv launcher does not discriminate against who it attacks, and therefore shooting into a group of 3 different factions, one of who you are working for, you're bound to hit some friendlies. And sure enough, I hit a lot of friendlies. So much so that I started getting quest updates that I had never seen before. And when I did make it to the synths at the end, I didn't even have an option to talk to them and therefore had to complete the mission another way. But even with the mission a success, if you can call it that, after returning to Father, I got yelled at for jeopardizing the Institute. I decided to continue on, but luckily that wasn't that big of a setback. I then attended a meeting and got yelled at some more, but I was now moving into the final stretch of the run, so come hell or high water, I was going to finish this. To help further pursue the end, I was tasked with raiding the Brotherhood of Steel for a super battery, but with more close quarters fights up ahead, I had to rely on my companions to thin out the herd. I may be able to kill most things with one shot, but considering I usually die in the process, I was willing to allow them to do some of the lifting this time. We eventually made it to the battery, and obtaining it was the easy part. Now we just had to fight the robot guards to actually make it out. But with enough explosions to level the city block, my homies and I made it to the exit with the goods. And instead of clearing out the Brotherhood in the lobby, I ran past them. There's no reason to steal kills from my comrades. Next up was recruiting Casper, and to do so I had to clear out a group of gunners in front of his house. You can guess how well that went. Inside, I told him I could take both of us out if he didn't comply, and he agreed to join our cause. But I wasn't done with talking yet. Next, I fixed up a radio machine in Diamond City and had to go pay one last visit to the railroad. I brought some fireworks to say goodbye, and they all fell asleep on me. These guys suck as party guests. So since the railroad couldn't hang, it was time to see if the Brotherhood could, and I won't lie, this was hard. I was running low on supplies and these guys hit like an absolute truck. But once I got to destroying some generators, my synth comrades joined in on the fight and tipped it in our favor pretty quickly. We had to hold our position a while a synth hijacked Liberty Prime, but the Institute won the day and the Brotherhood was brought down in an explosion that rivaled the mirv pistol. All that was left to do now was watch Father take a forever nap, and that concluded the run. I beat the game all without using perks and on the hardest difficulty. And there you have it, a run with tons of restrictions beaten by a pistol straight out of a demolitionist's dream. Like I said in the intro, I owe you guys a survival run and I will give it to you, it just might take some time before that happens. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like it and share it around, and if you have any suggestions for a challenge run, make sure to leave a comment down below. It doesn't have to be Fallout related, as next week I'm moving over to the Outer Worlds. And make sure to subscribe if you're new or don't want to miss out on any of these videos. And as always, I've been Chris from Crisis Gaming, and I'll see you on the next one.